Oh, hi! Today we're talking about the next step on our modern Dresden project. And I'm excited to share with you where I am and what I'm doing now. I'm trying a new technique and I want to tell you all about it just after this. And welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Hi, welcome back. Hope you got something nice to drink and listen to what I want to share with you today about our modern Dresden project. Last time we talked, I believe we were discussing how to put the borders on this project. You know, the borders are something very eye-catching with this project, and they are a little persnickety. So if you struggled with getting those borders on, I certainly understand that because I did too. And I found last night when I was looking at it a bit that there was one corner where it didn't attach just quite right, but it's probably about 1/8 of an inch off, and I'm not going to worry about it. I think it's so insignificant that it really doesn't matter. So we got all 4 borders on it. And then the next step in this project is to sandwich it and quilt it if you want a quilted project. If you just wanted a wall hanging and you were not going to quilt it, then you would go directly either to binding it with or without some type of backing on the back. And if you wanted to do that, then I would just use this video as an idea of how to put that backing on the back of your project, and then just skip on to our next video on binding. But back to my project, and I am quilting this. I am going to quilt it very lightly, and I toyed with the idea of doing it by machine, but I'm going the hand quilting route. I think I can do it probably within a week or so, so that's the way I'm going to do. And I'm going to quilt this how I feel like it needs to be quilted to hang on a wall. And I may come back at some later time and add some additional quilting to it. But for right now, I want to show you a little video that I recorded yesterday when I was sandwiching this quilt. So here we go. I'll show you that now. And then we'll be right back and I'll show you how I'm quilting. Hi everyone, it's Kim from the Shamrock Quilt Studio, and today we're doing a little something that we've kind of covered a little bit on the videos before, but we're going to do a little bit more with this new project we're working on. First of all, I'm covered in little thread snippets, so this is just going to be focused in on what we're doing today. The top is all finished. We put the border on. We have sandwiched it between a plain all cotton background, a warm and white batting, and look, we still have little things. This can be one of the most infuriating parts of this process because I used this on the top, the front and the back. I used it on the batting, front and back, and I used it on this a little bit because it came directly out of the stash, so it shouldn't have had anything on it. But still, we get these little pieces of thread that want to go everywhere, and hairs, my hairs. And it is a little troublesome with this because we've got such a wide variety of colors. We've got this bright white, we've got the solid black, we've got the patterns, and then we've got the blue and the green. So we've got a lot of different colors of thread that we're dealing with. A couple of other things that we're dealing with. I didn't want to, well, let me rephrase that. As always, I like to be very economical about how I'm using my materials. So for this project, I took 2 pieces of batting. One was almost big enough, but it was about 10 inches short. So I Frankensteined 2 pieces of batting together. And how I did that was I laid them out and overlapped them slightly, and then took a rotary blade and cut a wavy line down both thicknesses of batting. And then I separated them out so I had just the wavy line that matched. And then I set my machine up, and I took a picture of it. I put it on just a regular zigzag stitch. On mine it's a number 11. And it was set at 8.5 width and 5 length. So it was a very big stitch. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's this wide. So it's really wide. It's probably, I tell you what, let's measure it, because it's one of the wider stitches that I use. It is a good 1/4 inch wide. And then each stitch is probably almost the same, almost a 1/4 inch from the stitches. So it's a nice wide stitch. We don't want anything really thick. We don't want anything that gathers up our fabric. We want it to lay flat when we're joining those batting pieces. And the way I got it to lay down for me is I took a piece of regular tape, like a invisible tape, something like you'd use for your Christmas packages or gift wrapping, something, and I just taped across. And then when I did it like 4 or 5 times down just to hold it in place so it didn't want to switch on me. And then I stitched, and I stitched from the top side and the tape was on the bottom. So I just stitched right through it, not really paying any attention to where it was. And then once I got it all stitched and I was happy with it, I went in and pulled it off, just like I pulled that piece off. And sometimes it'll come off in one piece, and sometimes it'll have a couple of different pieces. But it is clear. And I'll tell you, that batting, it is the warm and white. That's just about the only batting I'm using now, because I'm real happy with it. But I think because this is a remnant from another project, it was kind of shedding a little bit, kind of like a dog or a cat shedding, or me. See, there's another little bit there. And it could be just moving it around. Okay, back to what I did. I put the batting down on the table and got it nice and smooth. And then I put the top of the quilt on it, got it nice and smooth, flipped the whole thing over and put the backing on. Got it nice and smooth. So now we've got all 3 layers. They've all been smooth. I will tell you a little bit about this quilt top and this border. It's a really fun border, but it is very challenging because of all the seams, and every one of those seams having to be near to perfect, because it wants to pull in this green fabric. I think you can see it a little bit there. So you just have to keep tugging at it to keep it square and then keep it level. See, it wants to bow out a little bit here and then come in a little bit here. So we're just going to have to keep playing with that just a little bit to get it even. Now, next step is we're going to pin it down. I'm not putting this small project on my quilt frame. I'm going to do it by hand, and I probably will do it without a hoop at all, because it is mostly straight lines and I want to keep those straight. I think that's going to be the best process for that. And I'm just going to start by pinning this. Now, you know, there's lots of different ways that you can baste a quilt. We're going to pin baste this one. And we're going to start there with the green. We want to make sure we get the bottom piece when we're pinning it in place. And this is going to be something, here we go, it's lightly quilted. It's not going to be heavily quilted. And I am using the curved or the bent pins. safety pins, and there's two kinds. There's a safety pin that looks like your regular safety pin. It's got the little circle on the end, and then it's bent here and bent here, and it's got the same kind of head on it. Then there's a pin that looks very similar, except it doesn't have the little circle on the back side, and that allows it to give and take once it's in the fabric. Let's see if I can demonstrate that for you. So we put this in, and if you're quilting along, you know, they make a little tool for this too. Okay. You're quilting along and you've put this in this way. You see that fabric comes all the way to the end of that pin. And that pin also has the ability to turn this way. And if you're working in a hoop, that can be very helpful. But just keep in mind that that allows your fabric to shift a little bit. And if you don't want that, you might want to consider a different type of pin. Okay, so here I've started on this. And I'm going to put in some pins here in the middle portion. But where my pins are really going to be is in this border, because I want to be able to ease those seams to where they need to be. And that probably needs one with them. I've got all kinds of different pins mixed in here together. We're going to put one here with that little circle on the back so it can't shift. And then here we're going to pull this one in a little bit. So it gets out a little straighter. And we'll just work our way down to get that where we want it. And then the next step, of course, would be your quilting. And just be mindful, if you happen to see any dark threads under this white, now is the time to get them out. I'll show you. Cleaned out all but one drawer, and let you know that the thing I probably need is in that drawer. You can use any kind of little tools to get in there and see if you can find the offending threads, if need be. And it's primarily going to be those little black threads, and it's the ones that ravel out of this at the end, just like that. So use the tools that you have as you need them. A little crochet hook is good sometimes to be able to slide down underneath this and grab that thread and pull it out. That's all I have today. I did want to just pop in and show you this as we move forward on this project, how you can maximize the materials you have, excuse me, by sewing together two pieces of batting, especially on something that's not going to take a lot of tugging and washing. Something like a wall hanging is a great opportunity for something like that. And it would allow you to use two smaller pieces rather than having to either buy a new piece of batting or to use a piece from a larger cutting of batting that you have for a larger project.
So I hope you enjoyed that and that it was very helpful to see how it was sandwiched and then pin basted, and you can see my pins here on the design. Now as I quilt along, I am moving and adjusting those pins to make sure that I'm able to sew where I need to sew, and then also if I need to adjust the top a little bit, I can use moving those pins to do that. Again, I want to emphasize that one of the things I found very helpful in doing this, especially because we've got the white and the black and the bright blue and green on this, and we don't want any stray threads to show through on this white backing. If you chose to do a different color backing, you wouldn't have to worry about that as much. But with the white, it will show through. And it's disappointing to do a lot of work on something and then find that stray thread. So in that sandwiching thread, I do use one of these little adhesive lint rollers a lot. And you can see here from this one just how many threads that did pick up. So it's very helpful, and every time I think I've got all of them, I'll find more, because when I was quilting last night on this, there were a couple of occasions, because I'm quilting right along the edge right now, where I would see a darker thread underneath that white in the border, and I would stop and go in and get it right then. So what am I doing, and how am I doing it differently this time? I have decided that initially what I'm going to do is quilt right along the edge of the checkerboard border, right outside the blue and green fabric. And I'm using what I would traditionally do, and that is about 4.5 to 5 stitches per inch. And there we go. I think you can see that in the overhead camera there. That's 4 to 5 stitches that you can actually see on the top of the design. So it would be actually, I don't know how they do that. I think they double it. So that would be about 10 per inch. Not a tiny, tiny stitch that people would normally associate with hand quilting. But also, as I've mentioned before, and I know everybody gets sick of hearing it, but I don't rock stitch. I do something like a stab stitch. There are times that I'll do a rocking stitch, but I find that I cannot get a small enough understitch to suit what I'm looking for. And also, I just don't like the way it looks as well, and it could be just me. I know there are people out there who can do a rocking stitch and give you a little itsy bitsy tiny stitch, and they're very happy with it. Every time I've tried it, I always find I have missing stitches on the back, or they're so small that they've caught maybe one thread on that backing fabric, and sooner or later it's going to pull out, you know that. So I typically don't do that, at least not yet. And my challenge that I mentioned, I guess towards the end of the year when I purchased this thimble, was to try to learn how to use it better. I haven't had any luck. I still find that it's too slick. It just slides all over, the needle does. And it's so cumbersome on my finger. I guess because I'm not accustomed to holding the needle between the ring finger and my thumb. I'm still accustomed to holding the needle with my middle finger and the thumb. That makes a difference. That all said, I'm doing it kind of the way that I always do it. So I'm stitching here, and I'm just sewing right along that seam where the blue comes into the checkerboard border. And I'm trying to make sure that I pull it out a bit when I'm stitching, because there's some areas where it didn't really get sufficiently pulled back. And if I give it just, let me take this pin out. If I give it just a little tug on that top fabric, then I get a nice clean turn down seam, and I can stitch it along. Now what you'll notice that I am doing differently is I'm not using a hoop. I'm not using it on a frame. I'm freehand quilting. And I don't particularly like to do this much, but in this situation, I thought it was the best way to go, because we want to get that seam around the outside to hold the whole thing in place and to secure the border. And that would mean that a hoop would have to extend halfway into the quilt and halfway off of the quilt to get the longest run of stitches. And if you've ever done that, that's difficult to do, and it requires moving that a lot. And then you've got 4 corners, and you have to somehow place this in the hoop to be able to get that corner to pull tight, and you're not going to get it to do it. You'd have to have one of those either special half round hoops, or you'd have to have a hoop where you have place something in it, like a piece of fabric that you could pin to pull it out. It was just more trouble than it was worth for something small like this. So in one evening, well, I'd say half an hour yesterday after I got it sandwiched, and then one evening, probably 2 hours, 2.5 hours, I started, where did I start? Right here. So I started halfway up this way. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, almost 5 12-inch blocks. So that's 60 inches in 2.5 hours, 3 hours max. So it gives you an idea how long it takes me. If you're a super fast quilter, that'll go much faster for you. I'm really, when I'm hand quilting, I'm not aiming for speed unless I am really close to the end and I'm wanting to finish it up to do something else. Then after that, I'm going to quilt around each of the 4 circles. I've already got one of those done because I wanted to see how it looks, and it's the same size stitch around. So I'm going to do all around, then I'm going to do the 4 circles. I haven't decided if I'm going to do a stitch down here. I think what I'm going to do is try to do a quilting stitch in the ditch, not next to the ditch, but actually in the ditch, so that the stitches will give you the pull and the puff of the line of stitching, but you won't actually be able to see the stitches because I don't want it on the blue side and I don't want it on the green side. I really want it right down the middle. So once I get this finished up and the circles, then I'm going to try that, and I'll update you on the next video about how that goes. I hope that works well because I think that's what would look the best. And then the only other thing that I'm going to do at this time is I'm going to put it back on the machine and run a little very long straight stitch along the very edge of the border so that I can trim it and get ready to put the binding on. And we will put the binding on the next video, and we're going to use just a single, is that a single fold? But that's a double fold by a single piece of fabric. So we will likely sew it on by machine from the front and then turn it over and sew it on the back by hand. And I'm going to use a black border because this is going to be a wall hanging. This is not a bed quilt. There would never be a time that you would turn this over to display the back. The only time you'd ever even look at the back would maybe to see what the stitches look like or the design of the stitches. So I think we're just going to stick with the black. A lot of words to tell you what I was going to do in the first place, right? So who knows, maybe we'll just cut all that out. So we're really close. We've got a little bit of homework for me to do in the hand quilting, and then I'll get most of the binding ready, but I will show you next time or demonstrate how I made that binding, and then we will start working on that, and then the next time you see it, it'll be hanging on the wall for display. I hope you enjoyed this video. I certainly appreciate the time that you spend with us watching what I'm sharing. My goal is to share with you what I'm working on in hopes that that would be beneficial to you and you might pick up a tip along the way. And I always welcome comments and tips from the viewers in our comment section to help me improve my quilting journey as well. There are hundreds of ways probably to do any task that we do in the sewing room, and not every single task works for everyone. So don't hesitate to share anything that you have that might be helpful to everyone else as well. It's been a joy to be with you today. I hope you've enjoyed this. Be sure to like our video, subscribe, and we'll see you next week at the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Have a great week.